item is the budget presentation.
All right, well, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me. I'm going to go ahead and present the 2021 budget for you all, especially those listening at home. You can find this budget on our website after tonight, but as well as you, the board members, have it there in your the online format that we have, as well as there's a couple printed budgets there for Matt and Jennifer and one for the press, so that you all have it to reference. I will highlight what I think is some of the most important parts inside the budget. But to start, let me introduce myself. My name is Dr. David Decker. This is my first year working here at USD 373. Before that, I spent about 16 years at the University of Kansas working at the endowment, as well as within their finance operation. And then before that, at Concordia State University. So a lot of higher education background, so really looking forward to this experience working with K through 12 from Newton product. Went to Roosevelt Elementary School, which is a middle school, Newton High School. So feel very comfortable in this environment, and again, really proud to be working with you. So to start with the presentation, I think this quote kind of summed it up the best. And it's a quote from Marion Edelman, who started the World Children's Fund, and the quote is simply, "The question is not whether we can afford to invest in every child, it is whether we can afford not to." So I think it's a powerful quote. It kind of reminds us that, hey, at the end of the day, whether you're an educator, whether you're the person putting together the budget, or whether you're a bus driver, we're all on that same mission, and that's investing in our children. Okay, so I will go ahead and get started. A little bit of what's new this year. I think many of you are familiar with this, but if not, glad to point it out. But the big thing is there's no waiver for required educational hours. So that 1,116 hours for grades 1 through 11, unlike last spring where we had a waiver for that, now those are going to be, those hours are going to be enforced. So having to build what the new school year looks like based on that fact. We also are expecting an increase in the base for per student from $4,436 to $4,569. So a little bit more money coming in from the state and the federal government to help us educate our students. We also have some other players in there, the CARES Act and the Sparks Act. The Sparks is more of a county-based support, but both of those are going to allow us to provide for grants to help us offset some of this emergency funding, some of these emergency needs that we're going to need for COVID-19. Now, I think the thing is, especially with the boards understand, and I know many of you do, but maybe the folks at home don't, is that this doesn't mean necessarily that we have a chunk of money sitting at the district office labeled CARES and Sparks. It means that we can apply for grants, and we may or may not get them, depending on what the other functions and what the other needs of the county are. So again, it's something to kind of keep in mind, that that's how that is going to work. As well as we have remote and flexible school attendance options. That's been fairly well documented here on the school board, but those two options are also providing a unique set of challenges for us this year, and some unique budget challenges for us. We're expecting a budget increase, and again, I kind of hit on this a little bit, but generally there's going to be an increase in state aid. We're also expecting an increase in our local option budget and our local option budget for state aid. So you can see the numbers there respectively. We're also expecting our capital outlay to increase as well. So overall, we're going to be expecting around a $600,000 overall increase if everything stays constant to what we have now. So that's about what we're going to be able to do additional things with. Here are our estimated weightings for 2021. This probably isn't as much of a surprise to many of you, but our overall enrollment at 3,343 students, what our high enrollment FTE is, what our bilingual FTE is, what our vocational FTE is, and so on and so forth. What it really is telling you is this is how the state decides to give out, how the federal government decides to give out appropriations. And it's based on the weights of what you have enrolled with certain types of populations. And Newton USD 373 happens to have a significant number of students that will qualify for these various populations, thus giving us a heavier weight when it comes time to budget. So if you think about it, because if you look across the state, there are school districts that are extremely wealthy, and school districts are not. This is all based on property system helps level out state aid across the state. So it's a little bit more fair of a playing ground where there's more education being spent here in Newton than what you might see in some other districts. Here you can kind of see the weighting compared to prior years, just to see a little bit of where we're going. And the FY '21 numbers, the only thing I'd really add in addition to that is that these are estimates because they're not really known until about the 20th day. But this is where we expect to line up. And you can even just see across the top just the steady kind of enrollment trend that is USD 373. I mean, it's declining a little bit, but not enough that it's, I don't even call it necessarily a decline, but relatively we're pretty flat. Here's some notes that I made about the state, about our budget. You can see the proration for bond interest and capital outlay decreased by 1%. The state aid increased by 1.4% for our local option budget. And we also have an increased cost of special education assessments that we're going to try to handle this upcoming year. So capital outlay went from 58 to 57%, and our local option budget went from 61.81 to 63.21. And so, again, that represents what the state is going to be giving us. On this slide is really, all that other stuff is very important, but what it comes down to, especially for folks at home, is when you want to know what's the overall budget. And this number is it. It's a $56 million budget, and this is what it's made of. You can see state aid comes in around 36 million, fees and assessments at about 7.5, property taxes at about 5.5, federal aid a little over 5 million. What food service sales generates, roughly 800,000. What motor vehicle taxes generate, and then interest miscellaneous is exactly that. Interest, and the miscellaneous is things like revenue that we gain from ticket sales, or from athletic events, etc. Which honestly are a little low this year because, as you guys know, we didn't have a lot going on in spring. Next slide sums up in a very basic way, because as you guys know, the actual budget is 140 some pages thick, and it goes into detail on everything. But if you could sum it up, this slide will do it, and it tells you more or less what we spend money on. You can see instruction and instructional support is by far the largest expense at $42 million, followed by administration support, operations, capital improvement, what we pay on our bonds and debt, and some miscellaneous extra costs, but those miscellaneous are actually pretty big items, such as transportation, food service, and our latchkey program. Again, just kind of reiterating a little bit of the major expenses that come out of the budget. You can see 83% of our budget is actually tied up in salaries, and 17% is what is left for all the other operations of the school district. And by the way, this is fairly consistent with what you see in other districts as well. So it's not abnormal, but it is kind of neat to see it that way, of how much actually is invested in human capital. Our property valuations for Hardwick County, you can see just over time since 2016 through 2021 what we're expecting, but overall a nice little increase there. It's roughly up in property values by 2.6%, which helps us in our budget here for the school district. That increase is also helping residents of Hardwick County that are going to experience a little bit of a drop in their mill rate. It's going to be roughly about a 0.45% or a 0.5% drop from 2020 to 2021. So if you're a property owner in town, you should feel pretty happy about that. But it also tells us, if you look at the trend, being back at 54.46 back in 18, that it's kind of, it's been going down for a while, but it also shows us that we also, the property value is going up, but we have some capacity if we become, if we feel we need to ask for an investment in the community. Property taxes per year, so when it gets down to it, especially folks at home are probably wondering, well, what does that mean for me? Well, on a $100,000 home, it's going to mean $1. So you can see here what the value of what the appraised $100,000 home, what your yearly tax would do. So again, we're moving from $654 to $653. One center at roughly about $90 to $95 of that $653 is actually for the rec center and not for the school district. You see, we've also done a pretty good job, you guys have, especially in years past, of handling the debt. So we're down about $3.3 million in debt this year, or about 11.5%. So a nice little chunk out of that. And the following year is going to get, the percentage is going to keep increasing, and eventually we're going to be out of that here in a couple of years. So a pretty good situation as far as what we have on hand and what we have in debt. Cash balances. Many of you know this, but for those that don't or that are new to the board, you might be surprised to know that we actually carry a significant cash balance, somewhere around the neighborhood of $10 million in cash is tied up in our accounts. And the reason for that, just to be upfront, is that starting in June, there really is no type of federal assistance or any type of payments coming to the school district. So we have to have enough money to be solvent for that entire time. So there's that. We also, unfortunately, have had some historical cash flow problems from the state. I think some of you guys have been around long enough to remember those days when the state would say, hey, unfortunately, you're not going to get the disbursement, so good luck meeting payroll. So USD 373 and you all in your wisdom were wise enough to put away a reserve to help us incur, should something like that ever happen again, that we could survive that. It also allows us the ability to purchase items, equipment as needed. A classic example is one of the boiler goes out in the high school, or a roof needs to be repaired, something that's pretty urgent that we need to make a move on right away. We have that money on hand so that we can go ahead and do that. The next slide is actually pretty telling. Again, this is in your bigger budget document, but this really tells you what the balances in those funds are. You'll notice here at the top that the general fund is zeroed out because it's the start of the new year. So that's intentional. But what we have done is we've moved money into all of these different allocations within the school district, and that's how they start their year. Now the intent is, again, just because the funding from the states takes a recess doesn't mean that the expenditures do. You still have to pay people, you still have to operate, you still have to incur costs. And so that's where those funds are sitting right now to get us through. Probably some of the bigger ones, as you can probably see, that there was a $300,000 drop in our reserve fund, and this predates some of us in here, but that was essentially used to pay that was a negotiated piece to pay for compensation last year, compensation increases, salary increases. So we incurred that. We incurred a little bit of drop in the textbook fund. I think that also is because of spring enrollment, some issues there. And then our vocational fund was down by about $90,000. So that's that career and post-secondary education training also came in a little lower. But with that said, when you go down to the bottom and you look at what the actual cash balances are, we're really not that far off from the nearly $11 million. You still have nearly $11 million in there at the end of this, or the start of this fiscal year. So again, in pretty good shape. Excellent shape, actually, I think, to have you sitting on that kind of revenue in our actual cash accounts. Some additional budget information. You can probably see from that previous slide, but there's a $4 million stash in there that's going to be used to pay our debt. And so that debt payment comes due in September, so it's kind of, it'll be leaving us pretty soon. But we have to have $4 million for that. And then also there's a pretty hefty balance in our capital outlay fund. So again, that's money set aside for capital projects for this year and ones that we're wanting to do in the upcoming years and to pay for those emergency expenses. In addition, I put in here a little bit of information about, because we're pretty unique with our special education co-op, just to keep in mind that while we have that co-op and it does have a nice healthy budget, one thing that we always have to remember is 30% of it also is shared. So 30% of it belongs to Halstead and Heston, and not necessarily just our school district. Hopefully tomorrow or the day after, provided you all decide to go ahead and move forward with our budget, this is the actual published budget that will be in the newspaper. And it is essentially all of the figures that I just showed you a lot of questions about this budget, but just know that if you as board members or even out in the public community, again, it's on our website, the full budget, as well as several of us have printed copies that we can go into more depth of how we come up with those figures. But ultimately, I think it's a pretty good story that the school district has a great cash balance situation. We have fairly low debt, and we have a decrease in the mill levy. So just from a taxpayer's perspective, I'm not sure what else more you could want from fiscal management of the school district. But that budget that's going to be published, it does list what the maximum amounts are that we can spend. So again, going back to that budget, just because it's in there and we're requesting X amount of dollars for a certain project or a certain line item, doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to spend all of it. But it allows us the flexibility to spend up to that amount if it's needed. And honestly, I think the school district, from even an outsider's perspective coming in, has done a really good job of showing some fiscal responsibility and constraint in a lot of areas. So our notice of hearing is going to be August 17th. So that, again, it's going to run in the paper, but then go ahead and have that hearing on the 17th. And that's when I hope that we're able to go ahead and formally pass the budget. And then this little piece I added in here, which is kind of as a new guy, it's my kind of personal philosophy on all this, and to you all as board members, is just to demonstrate transparency, accountability, and common sense budget practices that ultimately are going to position USD 373 to be the model of excellence in the state of Kansas. So if I can do that, and if you guys could be supportive of me as I try to do that, that would be awesome. All right, and so now I'm going to go ahead and open it up for questions. But again, if there's a question you want to ask or don't want to do it in front of the group or are at home, my contact information is right here. You can go ahead and shoot me a call or shoot me an email, and I'd be happy, again, to go into greater detail about what our budget has inside of it. I'm excited. There's a lot of unknowns because of COVID, because of how we're starting school, but seriously, from a financial perspective, you're in really good shape.
Anybody got any questions about that?
I don't know if that was a good idea. Trying to be louder for the audience. I saw, I think, 950,000 for capital outlay, or 900,000. Last year it was 1.2, and I know that we have significant capital outlay issues in this district. Can you explain why we're planning for a decrease in spend there?
Well, I don't know if we weren't planning for a decrease. It's just that roughly $300,000, let's just say, was actually already obligated to teachers and educators as part of their negotiated contract to fund salary increases. So that's where it went. We really didn't spend less or spend more. It was just simply that difference was used for salary. But in terms of what does capital outlay look like moving forward, again, that's something that I know Chris has put together a 5-year capital outlay plan, and I would be remiss to speak about it too much, but it is a plan that's already articulated and out there, and that's roughly what he's going to need. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so I understood the 300,000 to come out of contingency, so it's actually coming out of the capital outlay?
It was contingency. Yes.
Okay.
Sorry. Right.
Okay. So is what we have budgeted for capital outlay this year still around 2% like it was last year? Or
2% of.
I'm looking at last year's budget and it was 1.2 million and that was about 2% of the total. Maybe we can go back to how the money is spent slide.
Sure. Yeah, I must be.
I just saw the 900,000 and thought that's lower than usual. Yeah, 950 and 2%. Okay. This last year is 1.2 million and still 2%.
Yeah.
When you look at the budget document itself, like when you actually look at that, what the expenditures are going to be like in capital outlay, it does say there $3.8 million is what they plan to spend. Okay?
So the 950 plus what we have in our reserve right now.
No, that's how much you have to in your budget say you're going to spend all that amount of money, because even if you don't spend it, you have the authority to. If you don't budget that large of an amount, you can't spend that if there were a winter to go down or something like that. That's why you see that there. And that $950,000, I'm going to assume, would have been what was spent last year. It had to have been what was left over
Right.
last year.
Yeah, and so through our whole budget, really, not the whole, but there's definitely certain funds where we've estimated high, just to give ourselves some type of wiggle room for budget, for spending authority. Because if we budgeted it right on the dollar, we would have absolutely no wiggle room, and we really wouldn't have a way of bailing ourselves out if we overspent on something. And so this, again, it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to spend it all, but it gives us the authority to do it if we have to. Because we just simply don't know a year in advance what actual costs are going to be, so we have to guess to a certain degree. It's an educated guess, but it's still a guess.
Given projections that you've had in the past,
Right.
and it's accidents happen.
Right, then you think roughly, that 2% is roughly, because that's ultimately what we think inflation somewhere is gonna be around there. And so it's, again, it's not an exact science, but it allows us to make it a guess that we can defend.
So if I want to know how much we're budgeting for capital outlay in the upcoming school year, is it this slide or is it a different slide?
You would want to look at the budget document,
Right.
code 99, what he had showed there at the end looks like this. Okay, and that's, it's paid, I don't know what page it is on it. But we have budgeted $3.844 million for capital outlay. Okay, that's what's been budgeted.
Okay.
Okay, and that's the budget amount, but when you look in the prior year, the 2019-20 expenditures, they would have probably budgeted close to that amount, right? Okay, because that, you need to encumber your whole authority to budget, okay? But they only spent $2.405 million, all right? So if you would go back and look at last year's budget, they probably budgeted close to $3.8 million because they have to say that we're going to spend what we have in order to be able to spend it in any of those funds that you have.
Okay, that sounds more reasonable. I just saw the 950 and was like, that seems low for us with our needs.
I'm sure that it is.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay, thank you, Dr. Gray.
Thank you so much. Yep.
The next item is the consent agenda.
I move to approve consent agendas items A through C. Second.
Moved and seconded, any discussion? All those in favor? Seven oh. The next item is the approval of the 2020-2021 calendar.
You guys had that in your packet, and that was a function of the teachers group and myself and some administrators working to make sure that we can make these days work out. You gave us the start date last week, and now we've got the ending date and all the things in between. So we would just like you guys to approve it last week.
Any questions on that?
Great job.
They did a great
Reviewing
job.
all of that. It's a lot of work on a short time period, so it was fantastic. I appreciate that you kept some regular breaks, even if they're just a day or so. Everybody needs that mental break, so I'm grateful that you were able to do that.
Any other else?
You can ask what you do.
Okay, I'll take a motion.
Move to approve adjusted calendar for 2020-2021 school year as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor? Seven oh. Approve KASB recommended policy reviews.
You were given these policies to look at the last board meeting a week ago. The biggest one is the sexual harassment revised one. Then there are things that we still have to do within that from a structural perspective. So that was a big overhaul that dealt with a lot of Title IX stuff. That one is a long one, but that also, like I said, we're gonna have to do a lot of reorganization. I know that Jay has worked on some Title IX training that we're gonna participate in because we've got to make some additional appointments there and stuff, so. There's a lot of things. Nothing out of line with that.
Any questions?
I move to approve the recommended revisions to policy JCBAA, JGECKN, and the KN form.
Second.
Moved and seconded, any discussion? All those in favor? approve Opportunity Academy student handbook.
That should be as it was requested.
Okay. Cool.
Move to approve the 2020-21 Opportunity Academy Student Handbook as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded, any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? 5-2. COVID update.
Okay, we got some folks who are gonna make some reports on this, including myself. Sheila is gonna talk about the constructional side, and Jane is gonna give you a little bit of an update on the operational, and then I'll kind of wrap things up and leave you guys some opportunity to answer the questions you might have. So, whoever wants to go first,
I got it.
Jane's got it.
This last week, some of the operations team met. We looked at buildings and logistics of temperature screening. So we had elementary building principals here, high school, middle school, just to see what that could potentially look like at getting those temp screens on staff and students. So logistically, we're still kind of working through all of that, but we were able to get some additional information. We also have checklists that are due by Friday. So we have a temp screening checklist, a bus checklist, a COVID exposure guideline. So if a student or a staff member is being tested or they've tested positive or have traveled to one of the locations, we have all of that laid out of what that will look like. We have a custodial checklist of what they will need to do cleaning wise in addition to their normal job. A student mask checklist. We're working on a staff, and then we have a media center checklist. So the media center specialist got together, made a checklist of what that will look like when kids go out to the library and checking out books so that we can continue to do that for our kids. Any questions?
The first couple of checklists that you mentioned, can you explain what those are?
The health office checklist or the temp screening and the bus
Both of
checklist?
them.
The health office screening is going to be if a teacher has a sick kid in their classroom, is it something easy they can handle in the classroom? If so, a Band-Aid, that sort of thing. But if it's more than that without COVID symptoms, it's sending them to the nurse. And then also if the student has COVID symptoms, then that would be a separate checklist. And then the temp screening, again, we're still kind of working through that one because it's where they're gonna go through and get temperature checked. And then the bus one, do you wanna know? The bus one is, students will need to be sanitized before they get on the bus, and then just the different things that the bus driver will need to do after their route and before their next one with all the cleaning.
Do we have a checklist for if someone tests positive, or is that included in the symptoms?
It's going to be
Exposure.
included in the exposure. So we did, being tested, test positive, test negative but still has symptoms, and then travel quarantine are all our scenarios. Anything else?
There's like 9 different checklists within that operations folder that this team is working on. And Jane has done a really good job of trying to coordinate. It's like herding cats because you get that many people in a room, everybody's got an opinion in it, and they're all valid opinions. And it's to make something that can be really global so that folks don't have to think about what they need to do. They can just go to that nurse and make a good decision.
Has any of the language in the operations plan changed regarding masks?
I did change the Muir County guidelines, so that has been updated.
Everything else is the same?
Yes. I believe the direction, everybody was good with everything that way.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sheila?
One little update that came in just while we were meeting was from Brenda. Thank you for that. We had asked the families to complete their forms last week, and still, as of tonight, we have a little over 500 that we would like to hear from. So building principals, administrative assistants, and others have been doing personal personal phone calls to families and saying, can we get that information from you so we know that where you stand and what environment you would like to select. So the sooner that we can have that, the better, because then that's gonna allow us to be working on what does the remote learning look like, how many teachers do we need, all of those kinds of things. So if any of you are visiting with anyone that still hasn't decided, please encourage them to call their building, and we would be glad to answer questions for them if they're still just unsure as to, what all of that means. Otherwise then, last Friday, the instructional design team met. We did that online, and we're just looking at the strategic plan, but more importantly, anticipating that you would approve the revised calendar this evening and thinking about what was our professional learning days going to look like. And then Megan and I and several other staff members, including all of our building administrators, were meeting this morning again then to look at that a little bit more closely and trying to make sure that we're following what we have in negotiated agreement, but also what does that learning model need to look like. So we're trying to address all those needs from what's in the operations section and how staff will need to be mindful of that, to probably most importantly taking care of those social and emotional needs of our staff, and then trickle that down to our students and families. We're working on getting Canvas set up, and I know Brenda and Jody, we did a check-in with them today just to try to get all of that going, and as we talked about, we wish it was ready yesterday, so they're working really hard with their IT and trying to get our systems to sync. And then we're going to meet again tomorrow morning with building administrators to explain a little bit more about the professional learning schedule and how do we coordinate all of that, whether we've got paras coming in for special ed to aides and other staff coming in, trying to meet all of those needs and how will it make sense with building PLC reps meeting on Friday to see what everyone is wanting to plan. The district time will plug that in, but then each building needs to come up with plans that they want to do for their building and grade time. It's a little bit of an overwhelming task because we've never done this massive set of days all at once. So some of it, we write it down and we're like, is this going to make sense? Is this doable? And we're kind of having those conversations back and forth, and I just think we're going to have to continue to allow all of us to be patient and be flexible as we go through that it may make sense while we're talking about it that day, but the next day it might need to shift just a little bit, so.
Any questions on the instructional side?
You mentioned 500, is that 500 students or that you were still, or 500 families that you were waiting for that?
No, 500 students.
500 students.
District-wide.
So, and what's our locked-in enrollment right now, and what are we expecting it to be? Could you answer that?
I might have to defer to Brenda if she
Yeah, I don't-
happens to know.
I don't have those numbers, exact enrollment of families that are already enrolled. We have families that we expect to return that are not necessarily enrolled, but we can get those numbers. I do want to put a plug to what the administrators and administrative assistants did over the last couple of days, because we were way over 900 students that we had no response from. And that would have been mid-morning that they started that calling, and now we're down to 545. So they've done an incredible amount of work contacting families, so.
But we don't have a good idea of the percentage, like how many people are choosing remote versus flexible.
Oh, yeah, we do have that.
Okay.
Is that what you were asking? Did I misunderstood your question?
I was asking a different question.
Okay.
I was just asking, I mean, we have about, what, 3,000?
Yeah, around 3,300 usually.
3,300? Okay. But no, that's a good question too, right?
Yes, we can get that too. I actually was running reports on that for each school right now, but I don't have it done.
It's about 20% remote, if I
Yeah,
remember correctly.
that's what, yes, yeah.
20%.
20%. And that number, and when you start looking at that, then that's what Sheila is really nervous about. She should be, because it's figuring out, okay, how many teachers are we gonna need then to be able to orchestrate that instruction appropriately for those kids. And when I looked at the split on that, it was fairly consistent in the grade levels too. I mean, there wasn't a huge difference in terms of the number in each grade level.
Yeah, I just ran live data out of Infinite Campus, and I happen to be running reports on the flexible, so I just did it for all schools. And right now, we have 2,237 students that shows flexible, and then I can do the same with remote. I just have to choose the right report, so give me a few minutes here.
Some other things in relation to the planning, the next thing is to attack the gating criteria. And that's one of the things, we've got a sample plan from Johnson County that looks pretty good. So I'm gonna work, I know with, and try not to fall over Angela, I'm gonna work with some local people, including the health department, to come up with that gating criteria. I do know some of the questions parents have had is they have said they don't want to tell us what they're gonna do until we can tell them what sort of a mode and what our conditions are gonna be, you know, to go from a full in-person to a hybrid to a full off-site. So that's one of my things to do this week. And also work with Dr. Decker and the other departments to make sure that they have the stuff that they need. Dr. Decker put in this past week for the CARES, or for the Sparks dollars, which are the county dollars, a little over $950,000 worth of requests, which include the thermometers, Chromebooks, the hotspots. We had to back off on some of that because it only paid up until December 30. So we would have to use our CARES money for the remainder of those. Just things of that nature, sanitizing solution, some of the infrastructure expansion, so that, like I said, $950,000 of that for that. We also have some classroom needs or purchases that teachers want to make, some of them like for amplifying their voice through masks. So there's some things like that we're looking to kind of get a handle on what those costs are going to be. That'll be another thing we work on this week. And when you're thinking about all of this and kind of how this is going to evolve over time, it's real important to understand that it changes almost daily. And as I was saying a little bit earlier to some folks, we've had like resignations of different types of staff members, which makes things pretty difficult for us to consider how we're going to cover. We've had, I think, 4 aide or para resignations in the last day. We've had some certified staff member resignations as well. So just trying to figure out how we can cover that will be a challenge. Another thing that's going to be a challenge, we have new staff in today, for example. And this morning, one of the new staff members called, they got a quarantine based upon the situation that took place. By noon, we had another staff member that had to go home for a similar situation. So we had, what, 40 new staff, 30 new staff, something like that? So if that percentage carries out on a daily basis, it's going to be, you know, we're going to be calling Mallory, and Melissa, and Luke, and Angela to come and sub for us. I mean, it's just going to, and that's the thing too to understand is we're not going to find subs probably either. So it may be a deal after we look at some stuff, we may have to come to try to contract some substitutes just for the whole year for a semester. You know, that was an idea brought by one of the administrators today. We may have to do that just to be able to cover just for those daily occurrences that might initially take place. So, because that sub pool is not deep. Another thing that I want to do, we worked with the teachers this past week, the teachers group, on some of the negotiations items that were discussed a little earlier. I just want to give a shout out to the teachers group that we're great to work with. They understand the issues that we are facing. I think they understand that we understand the issues they're facing. This is just a really tough time to be in this professional setting, no matter where you're sitting. It really, really is. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and it's going to continue to go on every day, and we'll keep you informed as best we can. The one thing that I did do is I asked that you guys all have access through Google Drive to be able to look at just view the different plans that are taking place, which would include the different checklists and protocol lists and stuff that are being made. So you'll have access to that information. You should have it before you leave tonight. So it's view only, so you can't go in there and make a bunch of changes. And if you do, we can see the version history. We can find out who tried to do it. So, that's really about all I have in that regard. there's a lot more we could talk about, but do you have any questions for us?
And you and I can talk today about the gaming
Yes.
committee, and Angela and Mallory and Jennifer have said they're willing to participate in that process, so you'll coordinate with them. And I think Angela would appreciate if you could do it evening, or at least after hours, this is a busy
Yeah, I'm
week for her.
actually pretty busy with work this week and the first half of next week, so if there's an opportunity to stay in meetings, I appreciate that.
We will be in touch.
Or via Zoom in the day, I could probably make that work.
We'll probably offer a Zoom option for that, because I want to get going on that, because the meeting is the 17th, it's going to be
Speaking of Zoom, am I correct in understanding that all of the professional development at the beginning of this year will have a remote option?
Not a remote option, okay?
Social
For that,
distance option?
pardon?
A social distance
Yes,
option?
yes.
Okay.
Yes, if it's necessary to occur, yes.
Okay. And would teachers just need to reach out to you guys ahead of time to let you know that that would be a need for them?
We'll work with how that structure is gonna take place. We haven't really talked about the logistics behind that. We just wanna offer that for those staff members that have those needs.
Okay. And then on IDB, are we going to continue negotiating later in the year, or is the MOU?
The MOU will just take care of this. Okay, we do need to enter into IDB.
Okay.
We just had to suspend that in order to be able to get a calendar and all this other stuff.
You have a report?
Yes, 662 students have chosen remote.
And what was that number? 2,000?
2000.
I went out.
I think it was 2,237.
Yes, that sounds right.
I think it was 77%.
And before I could tell you how many submitted the form and what the percentages would be out of those, but now since administrators and administrative assistants have been calling, we have a lot more that have made their choice, and I don't have that total number of enrolled, to go back to Luke's question.
Last year, you know where I can find that information? I just, cart before the horse right now, anything else going on, or do we have any information on that?
I spent some time discussing with the last key coordinator how we could expand that. I'm hoping that we can. It's not real promising from the perspective of them having staff. Because a lot of their staff members, if we're talking like in that remote, we're part of that hybrid environment, a lot of their staff members are parents or age for us currently. So they would actually be working, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so we're trying to get creative about that. I'm hoping we can, because that's one of the things that we have on the Sparks money, that we would try to use that to enhance that. If we can.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a real important thing. Good question.
Any other questions? On the COVID update? Okay, thank you. The next item is the approval of the 2020-21 budget for publication. And this just gives us the authority to put it,
I move to approve the 2020-21 budget for publication as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded, any discussion? All those in favor? So approval of gift requests.
I move to approve the gift request as presented. We would like to thank Jason Myers for the donation to the Newton High School Automotive Program for a 1998 GMC in the value of $3,500. We'd also like to thank the NHS Athletic Booster Club for their donation to Newton High School for the district kettle subscription for all sports groups, grades 7 through 12 in the value of $4,820.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor? Okay. Approve Go Guardian Essential Tools Suite.
That is our internet filter. Brenda can answer questions better than I can about that, but that replaces Lightspeed.
Lightspeed Relay, yes.
And it's something we have to have obviously in place, and it's actually a little cheaper.
Yes,
So
it is, about
It's got more features.
9,000 cheaper. with many more features, a lot more artificial intelligence to give us exact reporting, features that teachers will really like. So a component of Lightspeed Relay that opened up, probably about a year and a half ago was Classroom. Teachers are able to see what students are doing on Chromebooks. They can display what's on their screen. They can display what's on other kids' screens. So kind of use it as projectors without a projector kind of thing. So it helps in delivery of instruction. GoGuardian's version of that is, I don't know how to phrase it, but it gives you a lot more options that teachers will very much appreciate. We have had some technical difficulties with Lightspeed Relay in the last couple of years as they've grown. Their support used to be phenomenal, and that has not been our experience in the last couple of years. I did reach out to Kathleen and got her feedback. One of the concerns that the techs had as we researched other options was, with all the changes, is this the time to change? Because we need to renew. So do we want to put money into something we're not really happy with? So I reached out to Kathleen and talked to her and Megan Nagel, since they both work with teachers throughout the district and are really very involved in the temp of the teachers and concerns, and they felt it would be very advantageous to move forward with it. So we're pretty excited about the type of features they have, and if you want more information on that, I can share it with you.
Brenda?
Yes.
With the filtering, is that filtering still in place when students take their devices home and
Yes.
on their home network?
Yes, and that is currently, available with, we do that right now.
Right.
What's really nice is parents will be able to add filtering to that. So let's say you find that your, sweet, or I'll use my sweet 15-year-old is, not getting into anything inappropriate because they can't, but they're watching YouTube videos on how to make something that has nothing to do with their work. As a parent, you'll be able to go in and put other restrictions on that, so, which is exciting. We've not had that before.
And really important with everything we're gonna be dealing with this next year. especially
Exactly.
when it gets home. Thank you for
Exactly.
that.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the purchase of GoGuardian Essential Dual Suite for content filtering required by CIPA.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? 7-0. Approved purchase of Chromebooks.
These are for, to supplement those, for aides and parents and other staff across the district. We talked about that in the meeting last week, and we had talked about what we were doing for funding. So this is our bid.
Can we use, Sparks or CARE money for this? Okay.
And this is one of the expenses that we asked for on the Spark side.
This would also include devices for Cooper. We were fortunate enough to still have our older, outdated Chromebooks that we hadn't sold on AAA yet, and so we could pull those in March. But those are past updating, and so this would take care of Cooper families as well.
Move to approve the purchase of 500 HP 360G3 Chromebooks as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? 7-0. Okay, last item is board comments. Angel.
Tomorrow's an election day, so get out and vote.
Luke.
No problem.
I just want to say thank you again to everyone putting in all the work and time to make this work for our new school year coming up. And congratulations to the class of 2020 and their graduation last Friday night. Thank you.
I just want to thank staff again for all your hard work. we appreciate you, so thank you for all of that behind the scenes work, which is so important. I'm just grateful to have people who are stepping up for our kids every day, especially when it's really difficult, so thank you.
Shout out to Dr. Decker, who put together his first budget for us. It was really good. I know we're all gonna go home and deep dive into this, yeah, line by line memorize it, but thank you, really appreciate it, and obviously, the community appreciates having some explanation on how things function and why we keep balances and things like that, so, thank you.
All right, I have nothing.
I move to adjourn.